Unaware I had just inherited $150 million, husband slapped wife for serving him. His meal late, what she did next, crushed him. He didn't just raise his voice. He raised his hand. The clock on the wall read 7:47 p.m. Dinner was 2 minutes late. Richard Brooks walked in, his face like thunder. 2 minutes, he hissed, seeing his empty place at the table. Is it that hard to do the one thing I ask? Emma flinched, her hands trembling as she rushed with the plate. I'm sorry, Richard, it's ready, right? His hand met her cheek before she could finish. The sound of the slap was sharp and brutal. It was so hard the dinner plate she was holding slipped from her fingers and shattered on the floor. And it all happened right in front of the large kitchen window, as their neighbors stood on the sidewalk, frozen in horror. He didn't look at the broken plate. He just stared at the red mark on her face. Next time, he growled, yanking the blinds shut to hide his shame, know your place. Emma didn't know that at that very moment, in a quiet law office across town, a file with her name on it sat on a polished desk. Inside that file was a final decision from the court about her late Aunt Margaret's estate, a decision that made Emma the sole heir to a fortune worth $150 million. She swept the broken pieces off the floor while he complained about the food. He went upstairs texting another woman. She went to the bathroom, locked the door, and stared at her own reflection, the red mark on her face burning like a question. When her phone finally rang, and a calm male voice said, Mrs. Brooks, we need you to come in and sign your inheritance documents. The world shifted, but she didn't scream, didn't throw anything, didn't pack a bag. She went quiet, because sometimes the most dangerous woman is the one who stops begging and starts planning. Dear viewers, thank you for being here. If you watch without subscribing, it is like turning your back on Emma the moment she finally stands up. When you click that button, you stand with every silent wife, every overlooked woman, and every person who was told to know their place. Please subscribe now and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. The way Emma answers this slap will shock you. The knife clattered onto the counter, slicing through the quiet like a warning. Emma flinched. She wasn't hurt, just startled. The clock on the wall ticked towards 7:45 p.m. 15 minutes passed when Richard said he'd be home. He hated late dinners. Dinner should greet me, not the other way around, he always said. She checked the stew again, lowering the heat and smoothing the tablecloth with her palm. Every crease had to be perfect. Every plate, aligned like soldiers waiting for inspection. Emma Brooks, 31, had once been a financial analyst in a downtown firm, sharp in heels and confidence. Now she was a homemaker, by choice, or maybe by persuasion. She had left her job 3 years ago to support her husband, Richard Brooks, 36, a business consultant with big dreams and bigger opinions. He'd convinced her it was better for the marriage if she stayed home to manage things. Behind every great man is a woman who knows when to stay behind, he once said, half joking. But jokes like that stopped being funny after the first year. Still, Emma tried. She believed in keeping peace, in building a home that felt warm and safe. Her mother had died when she was young, and her late Aunt Margaret had taken her in. Aunt Margaret was stern but kind, a woman who believed that order was love. When a house is calm, the heart is calm, she used to tell her. Emma lived by that, perhaps too well, but there was always an invisible distance between her and her aunt after Emma's father's death. Some family feud had split them years ago. Emma never knew the full story. After Margaret passed a year ago, she left behind only silence, and an official-looking lawyer's letter Emma never had the heart to open. Richard had intercepted it, glanced at the legal letterhead, and tossed it on her desk, saying, It's just some probate junk, Emma. Don't get tangled in their family drama. It sat at the bottom of a drawer upstairs, gathering dust, unopened. The sound of tires crunching on the driveway pulled her from memory. Emma's chest tightened. She straightened her dress, smoothed her hair, and positioned herself near the door. When Richard entered, the air seemed to change. He filled the doorway, tall, polished, his tie slightly loosened, his jaw tense. He always smelled of cologne and importance. You're late, she said softly, her voice more observation than accusation. He kissed the air near her cheek, not her skin. Traffic, he muttered, already walking toward the table. Emma trailed after him, trying to read his mood. Long day. Richard sat down, loosened his tie further, and nodded toward the stew. You added too much salt again. You should taste before you serve. Her heart sank. I did taste it. Then your tongue's losing discipline. He took another spoonful, as if proving his point. Emma's hands tightened around her apron, but she said nothing. She wanted to remember the man she married, the one who once sent her flowers for no reason, who promised, "We'll build a life where love doesn't feel like labor." That man was gone somewhere behind the man at her table now. Richard ate slowly, eyes on his plate. Don't talk while I eat, he said, not even looking at her. She nodded, folding her hands. Silence filled the space. The ticking clock grew louder, stretching the moment until it hurt. In the quiet, Emma's thoughts wandered again, back to the unopened letter from Aunt Margaret's lawyer. It wasn't that she didn't care. She just didn't think it mattered. Her aunt had been wealthy, yes, but distant. Surely whatever she left behind wasn't meant for Emma. She had closed that chapter years ago, after the funeral that Richard hadn't even attended because of a client meeting. He had actively discouraged her from going, calling it a distraction. Still, sometimes when the house was too quiet and her heart too heavy, Emma wondered what that letter said. She had dreams once, to open a financial consulting firm for women, maybe even help those starting over. But Richard called it a distraction. He wanted a wife, not a competitor. Are you listening? Richard's voice cut through her thoughts. Emma blinked. Sorry? He sighed loudly. You really need to learn focus, Emma. A wife should always know her husband's needs before he asks. His words came sharp but calm, the tone that scared her most. I'll do better, she said quietly. He nodded, satisfied, pushing his chair back. You always say that. As he rose, his phone buzzed on the table. A woman's name flashed across the screen. Samantha. Emma's stomach nodded. Richard's eyes darted to the phone. Without hesitation, he turned it face down and slipped it into his pocket. Work call, he said quickly, his tone too smooth. Don't wait up. He brushed past her, the faint smell of his cologne lingering in the air as the door shut behind him. Emma stood there motionless, her heart echoing the ticking clock. She stared at the empty plate, the untouched half of his meal, the silence pressing in like fog. For the first time, she noticed how large the dining room felt, when only one person was breathing. Her gaze drifted to the stairs, to the drawer where the old letter still waited, sealed and forgotten. A thought flickered, quiet but unsettling. Maybe it was time to open it. The argument began with a sound. A knife slammed against the counter, sharp enough to slice through morning peace. Richard's voice followed, deep and irritated. Emma, are you burning the eggs again? She wasn't. The eggs were fine, golden at the edges, just the way he liked them. But the question wasn't about food, it was about control. I'm not burning them, she answered softly, sliding the plate toward him. Breakfast is ready. Richard sat at the table, scrolling through his phone, his suit jacket already on, though he hadn't finished his coffee. He didn't look up. Next time, less oil. You know I like it clean. Emma stood still for a moment, trying to hide the small tremor in her hands. All right, she said, forcing a smile. Her voice was calm, almost practiced. It was a bright morning, sunlight pouring through the kitchen window, yet the room felt heavy. The warmth in their house never matched the warmth outside. She placed a glass of juice beside his cup. Richard, she began carefully, that law firm from my aunt's estate called the main line yesterday. They left a message. His name's Mr. Collins. He said it's important. Richard stopped scrolling for a second, then sighed as if the topic bored him. Probably some will nonsense. I told you to ignore that letter. They always want signatures for taxes or estate junk. Forget about it. We don't need to get caught in some legal mess. Emma tilted her head, but he said I might need to come in person. He's been trying to reach me for a year. Maybe Aunt Margaret left. He cut her off. Emma, don't start dreaming. She didn't like you much, remember? You told me that yourself. That hurt more than she let show. She swallowed and nodded. I just thought, don't think. Just let the lawyer handle whatever it is. He stood abruptly, grabbed his coffee, and headed toward the living room. Emma stared at his back, confusion mingling with something colder. Her aunt hadn't liked her? Maybe, but Aunt Margaret had raised her when no one else did. She wasn't cruel, just distant. Emma remembered nights as a child when her aunt sat reading in silence, the only sound being the ticking clock. It was true they grew apart later. Emma had chosen love over ambition, marriage over independence. Margaret had called it a mistake. Maybe she'd been right. "Richard," Emma said again, following him, "it won't hurt to hear what he wants. Maybe it's just paperwork." He turned, smiling in that way that wasn't a smile at all. "You really don't listen, do you?" The way he said it wasn't loud, but it hit like a slap. Emma's body froze, heart thudding. He sighed, putting a hand on her shoulder as if to soften it. "You worry too much. Focus on keeping the home steady. Leave the business stuff to me." She nodded, lips pressed together. He kissed the top of her head, more out of habit than affection, then walked out the door. As soon as the door closed, silence wrapped around the kitchen. Emma exhaled slowly, staring at the plate of untouched eggs. She picked up the phone and looked at her recent call list. Mr. Collins. Voicemail. The number glowed faintly on the screen. Her thumb hovered over the callback button. Then she paused. No. Richard would be angry. She scribbled his name and number onto a yellow sticky note and pressed it on the fridge. "Just in case," she whispered. For a moment she allowed herself to remember her wedding day, her veil slipping as Richard helped her fix it. His whisper, "I'll protect you forever." The way he'd smiled then, all charm and confidence, made her believe she was safe. But that was before the corrections started. Small things like how she walked, what she wore, how she spoke. Now forever sounded like a sentence, not a promise. Her phone buzzed again, snapping her from thought. A message popped up from her best friend, Tara. Tara had been her college roommate, the one person who always spoke truth even when it hurt. "Tara, you sure he's faithful?" "My cousin saw him at the Hilton last week." Emma's breath hitched. She read the message twice, her fingers tightening around the phone. Hilton? Richard had said he was at a client meeting that same night. Her chest ached, but she typed nothing. Slowly, she deleted the message, her thumb pressing delete twice, once for the words, once for what they meant. "I trust him," she said under her breath, though even her voice sounded uncertain. She turned back to the fridge. The sticky note fluttered slightly in the breeze from the open window, as if reminding her it existed. Mr. Collins. She stared at the name longer than she meant to, then walked away. But before leaving the kitchen, she stopped and looked at the front door Richard had just closed behind him. His voice still echoed faintly in her mind. "You don't listen." She didn't know why that sentence stung so much. Maybe because for the first time, she wondered if she should start listening. Not to him, but to her instincts. She reached for her phone again. Her finger hovered over call back. Then her gaze fell on Richard's phone, forgotten on the counter. The screen lit up once. Samantha. "Last night was perfect. Same time today?" Emma froze, breath caught between shock and disbelief. The sound of his name in her head disappeared completely. Silence returned, sharp, accusing. Her eyes flicked to the phone, then to the fridge where the sticky note still waited. 2 ignored warnings, and now 2 secrets sitting in her kitchen. The sound came first, the shatter of porcelain against tile. Emma froze. The dinner plate lay in fragments on the floor, stew spreading like a dark stain. She hadn't even realized she'd dropped it. The smell of burnt rice hung heavy in the air, and her heart raced fast enough to drown out the ticking clock on the wall. She had been distracted all evening, the image of Samantha's text message burning in her mind. Richard's voice sliced through the room. "Emma, what is this? You can't do one simple thing right?" She turned quickly, breath shallow. "I'm sorry. I was just finishing the salad." His eyes flashed. "The food is late, the rice is burnt, and you're giving excuses?" She tried to speak, but her words came out small. "It's only 2 minutes." The sound of his hand hitting her cheek was louder than the plate breaking. The slap came so fast it stunned her body still. Her head jerked to the side, pain blooming hot and sharp. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just stood there, one hand slowly rising to her face. The mark burned, her pulse thudding against her palm. Her gaze, blurred and unfocused, drifted past Richard's shoulder. Through the large kitchen window which faced the front street, she saw them. Mr. and Mrs. Gable, their next-door neighbors, were standing stock-still on the sidewalk, their small dog's leash frozen in their hands. Their faces were pale, mouths slightly open in horror. They had seen everything. Richard, noticing her stare, spun around. He saw the neighbors. A flash of pure fury, different from his domestic anger. This was public humiliation, crossed his face. He didn't yell at them. He turned back to Emma, his voice a low hiss. "Now look what you've done." He strode to the window and yanked the blinds shut with a sound like a gunshot. The room was plunged into artificial light, feeling even smaller and more dangerous. He turned back from the window, adjusting his cufflinks, brushing invisible dust from his sleeve, as if closing the blinds had erased the moment. Emma's breath came out in a broken whisper. "My place?" He didn't answer. He sat down at the table, pulled the chair in, and began eating from another plate. "You make things hard for yourself," he muttered. "A good wife knows how to keep her husband calm." The room seemed smaller suddenly, airless. Emma stared at the floor, at the pieces of porcelain glinting in the light. The stew was seeping slowly toward her bare feet. Something inside her cracked, not loud like the plate, but soft, internal, final. She walked quietly to the sink, grabbed a cloth, and knelt down to clean. Each motion felt mechanical, the world blurred, her body working on instinct while her mind replayed the sound of his voice. He kept eating, completely unfazed. "And wipe that mess before it stains the floor," he said, mouth full. Emma's hand trembled. Her reflection shimmered faintly in the stainless steel of the sink. Her eyes didn't look like hers anymore. As she reached to pick up another piece of the plate, her hand brushed against the edge of the counter. The yellow sticky note. Mr. Collins. The name stood out like a whisper in the storm. The back of her throat tightened as a memory surfaced. Her mother's face, pale and tired, lying in a hospital bed years ago. Her mother had once said, "Emma, love is patient, but it should never hurt." Then, as she reached for her daughter's hand, she added, "Never let a man teach you pain as love." Emma had promised she wouldn't. She had meant it. But life had a way of making you forget your promises in small steps. First you forgive shouting, then insults, then distance, until pain becomes normal. She stood up slowly, her cheeks still red. "Richard," she said softly, "I'll fix another plate." He waved a hand dismissively, his eyes on his phone now. "Don't bother. I've lost my appetite." The screen's glow reflected in his eyes. Emma saw a message flash across it. "Samantha. Still on for tomorrow? Miss you already." Her body went still again. He didn't notice. He just locked his phone, slipped it into his pocket, and leaned back, satisfied. Her fingers clenched around the damp cloth. The burn on her cheek throbbed. But something colder was taking over inside her. A calm she didn't recognize. She placed the cloth on the counter and turned off the stove. "Good night," she said quietly. Richard looked up, suspicious. "Now you're sulking?" "I'm just tired," she answered, her tone neutral. He studied her for a moment, then shrugged. "You always are." He stood, walked past her, and went upstairs without another word. The sound of his footsteps faded until there was only the soft hum of the refrigerator. Emma stood alone in the kitchen, surrounded by quiet chaos. The floor was clean, the plates stacked, everything in order again. But something inside her had shifted forever. Her cheeks stung with every heartbeat. She looked at the sticky note once more, tracing the letters with her finger. "Mr. Collins." She went upstairs, not to the bedroom, but to the guest bathroom. She locked the door. She stared at her reflection, at the red mark. She needed a lifeline. She needed to hear a kind voice. Her hand shaking, pulled out her phone, and dialed the number from the sticky note. It rang once, twice. The pounding started hard and sudden, fists slamming on the bathroom door. "Emma, what are you doing in there?" Richard's voice boomed from the hallway, thick with irritation. Emma's fingers shook as she pressed the phone tighter to her ear. She whispered, Just give me a minute." Her voice cracked. She held her breath, trying to stay quiet. "Mrs. Brooks?" The voice on the other end was calm, older, professional. It was Mr. Collins. "I'm so glad I reached you. I've been trying to get in touch for months. Please don't hang up. This is important." Emma pressed her back to the door, clutching the phone like a lifeline. I'm here. I'm sorry. It's been difficult." Her voice trembled, though she tried to sound steady. "That's all right," Mr. Collins said gently. "I understand. I'm calling regarding your late Aunt Margaret's estate. The verification process is finally complete. You, Mrs. Brooks, are the sole heir to her assets, valued at approximately $150 million. The words hit her like thunder. 100 and... What? Emma's voice came out faint, almost disbelieving. 150 million, he repeated. Your aunt's properties, company shares, and bonds have all been processed. The court confirmed the transfer this week. We simply need your signature on a few documents. Emma stared at her reflection in the mirror across the bathroom. The woman looking back seemed like a stranger, eyes wide, skin pale, a bright red handprint on her cheek. "There must be a mistake," she whispered. "My aunt and we barely spoke before she died." Mr. Collins' tone softened. "Your aunt wrote a personal clause in her will. She said, and I quote, 'Emma has something money cannot buy, a good heart. That alone deserves the world.'" The words made her eyes sting. The mirror blurred as tears welled up. She remembered her aunt's face when she was 15, strict but kind, sitting in her garden trimming roses. That day, Aunt Margaret had said, "Kindness is the only inheritance that multiplies, Emma. Never forget that." At the time, Emma hadn't understood. Now those words came rushing back like sunlight after years of gray. "But why didn't anyone tell me earlier?" she asked, her voice breaking between shock and confusion. "The estate was under audit for unresolved taxes," Mr. Collins explained. "It took time to clear. We sent registered letters to your address. When those went unanswered, we started calling. But the main line for your household, well, a man who identified as your husband said you weren't interested and to stop contacting you." Emma closed her eyes, the blood draining from her face. Richard hadn't just told her to ignore it. He had actively blocked the calls. He had screened her one path to freedom. "I'll come by tomorrow," she said quietly, her voice no longer shaking, but cold. "Good. Bring an ID. And Mrs. Brooks," the lawyer added, "your aunt trusted you more than anyone. She believed you'd know what to do with this gift." Her throat tightened. "Thank you," she whispered. The line went dead. For a long moment she stayed frozen, back against the door, phone limp in her hand. Then slowly she looked at the mirror again. The reflection staring back wasn't the same timid woman. Her cheek still bore the mark of his hand. But now beneath that bruise, something stronger was beginning to form. Resolve. She ran cold water over her face, letting the shock cool into silence. $150 million. Not just money, freedom, power, protection, all the things she thought she'd lost. A tiny laugh escaped her lips, half disbelief, half awakening. "You have no idea, Richard," she whispered to herself. The laughter died quickly when she heard heavy footsteps approaching. "Emma!" Richard's voice thundered again, closer now. "Who are you talking to?" She froze. The doorknob rattled violently. "Emma! Open this door right now!" Her heart pounded. She hid the phone under a towel, wiped her face dry, and forced her breathing to steady. Just washing up," she said, her tone fragile but even. Silence followed, then his voice low and suspicious. "I don't like secrets in my house." His footsteps retreated, but each one echoed with a threat. Emma stared at herself once more in the mirror. Her reflection trembled, then steadied. For years she had been the quiet one. But tonight, the woman in the mirror looked different. Her silence was no longer fear, it was strategy. She touched the mark on her cheek and whispered, "This ends soon." The water from the shower roared like thunder behind the closed bathroom door. Emma stood in the hallway, frozen, staring at the small rectangle of light on Richard's desk. His phone. It buzzed once, paused, then buzzed again. Her pulse quickened. She stepped closer. Another vibration. This time the screen lit up long enough for her to see the message. "Can't wait for tomorrow night, Sam." Her stomach twisted. For a moment she couldn't breathe. She reached out, her fingertips hovering just above the phone. Then with a shaky breath, she picked it up. His passcode, as always, was his own birthday. The arrogance of it. She unlocked it. The messages scrolled up endlessly. Long conversations filled with flirty jokes, hotel bookings, and voice notes. The words blurred before her eyes, but one line stood out. Samantha, wish she'd stop calling you during our dinners. Richard, she's harmless, just likes to feel important. Harmless. Emma's hand trembled as she set the phone down. Her reflection caught in the glass of the cabinet, pale, motionless, but with something sharp behind the eyes. The hurt was there, but under it, something new was beginning. Clarity. The sound of the shower continued, steady, unaware. She took a step toward his desk. His laptop was open, the screen still active. The financial spreadsheet blinked with rows of numbers and accounts. Curiosity tugged at her, an instinct she thought she'd buried years ago when she left her finance job. She moved closer, clicking through his folders. At first, nothing looked wrong, but then she saw a tab labeled Consulting Fees, Private. She opened it. Multiple transfers, each for $25,000, all directed to a woman named Samantha James. The memo line for each read, Consulting Services. Emma's hands tightened on the edge of the desk. Samantha wasn't just a mistress, she was being paid. A memory flashed across her mind. Richard sitting in the same chair months ago, sighing dramatically. The firm's cutting costs, Em. I'll need to borrow from your savings, just for a bit. We'll make it back soon. She had trusted him then. She'd withdrawn everything she had left, her emergency savings, her small inheritance from her father, and handed it over. He'd kissed her hand and called her his angel. Now she knew exactly where that money had gone. The shower turned off. Emma's heart jumped. She closed the laptop fast and slid the phone back where it had been, screen down. She straightened the chair, adjusted a pen, every detail back in its place. The bathroom door opened. Steam rolled out, carrying the scent of Richard's expensive cologne. He appeared in a towel, humming softly, completely unaware that his double life had just been exposed. Dinner ready? He asked casually, rubbing his hair dry. Emma's voice came steady, almost too calm. Almost, he smiled faintly. Good, I'm starving. She turned toward the door but paused. Her eyes lingered on the desk for a second longer, on that same pen she had just straightened. Then she smiled. You always are. He didn't notice the edge beneath her tone. He disappeared into the closet, whistling. Emma stepped out quietly, closing the study door behind her. The hallway light flickered once. She pressed her hand against her chest and let the air out slowly. Her reflection in the hallway mirror caught her eye again. The bruise on her cheek faint now, fading. But her eyes were colder, sharper, alive with a new purpose. He had thought she would break. But she wasn't breaking. She was watching. She went to her bedroom, took out her notebook, and wrote a name carefully across the first page. Samantha James. Then below it, $25,000, consulting fees. Her pen hovered before she added one last line. Document everything. The quiet of the house deepened. She could hear him humming, unaware that the woman who once whispered apologies was now building something else. Evidence, plan, justice. As she tucked the notebook into her drawer, her inner voice whispered, steady and calm. He taught me silence. I was about to teach him consequence. The next morning, Emma waited until Richard left for work. A client meeting, he'd said, which she now knew meant Samantha. The second his car was gone, she was out the door. She stumbled inside Tara's apartment, chest heaving. The bruise on her cheek had darkened overnight, hidden poorly under makeup. Her eyes were red, not from crying, but from sleepless calculation. Tara rushed from the kitchen, startled. Emma, what happened? For a second, Emma couldn't speak. She simply held out her phone. The screen lit up with a message thread. Samantha. Tara's mouth fell open. Oh my God! Emma's voice came low, steady and cold. He's been paying her. I saw the transfers. My savings, Tara. Every cent I gave him. Tara's expression shifted from shock to anger. He used your money for his affair? Emma nodded. And he slapped me last night. She paused, then added, and I'm inheriting $150 million from my Aunt Margaret. Tara just stared, her brain trying to process the emotional whiplash. What? I can't just leave, Emma said. Not yet. I have to be smart about this. There was silence for a moment, filled only by the soft hum of the refrigerator. Then Tara said, "My cousin Nathan's a lawyer. Family law. He deals with men like Richard all the time. Let me call him." Emma hesitated. "I don't want to drag anyone else into this." "You're not dragging anyone," Tara said firmly. "You're taking your life back." Minutes later, Nathan arrived. A tall, calm man in his late 30s, dressed in a dark suit, though it was late afternoon. His voice carried quiet authority. "Emma, I'm Nathan Carter. Tara told me a little. You've done the right thing coming here." He listened as Emma described the slap, the affair, the money, and the hidden control Richard had kept over her life. Nathan didn't interrupt. He simply nodded, eyes sharp behind his glasses. When she finished, he leaned forward. "First rule, don't confront him. Let him believe you're still the same. That's how you collect proof. You'll need evidence of his abuse, infidelity, and misuse of funds. Words won't hold in court. Documents will." Emma swallowed hard. "I can get those. I used to do bookkeeping before I quit my job." A small smile tugged at Nathan's mouth. "That helps. You understand records. Use that." Something inside Emma flickered, like a light being switched back on. She remembered her aunt sitting beside her at the kitchen table when she was 17, teaching her how to keep ledgers neat. "Always keep a record, even of kindness," Aunt Margaret had said. "Memories fade. Proof doesn't." That memory steadied her hands. "I'll start tonight," Nathan nodded. "Install a small camera in the house, somewhere ordinary. Keep copies of every file you find. And Emma," he paused, looking directly at her, "sometimes justice isn't loud. It's just airtight." Those words settled into her like a seed. By evening, Emma was back home. She moved quietly, like someone learning to breathe underwater. Richard was out. He had told her he'd be meeting a client. She knew what that meant. In the kitchen, she unboxed the small camera Nathan had given her. Her fingers worked fast and sure, sliding the lens into the corner above the cabinet. When the red light blinked once, she exhaled softly. It worked. Then she wiped her hands clean, straightened the dining area, and turned off the main lights. Her phone buzzed. A message from Tara. "You okay?" Emma typed back. "I'm okay. I'm working on it." But as she hit send, she heard the sound of keys turning in the front door. Her entire body tensed. Laughter filled the hallway. A woman's laughter. Emma's stomach dropped. Richard's voice followed. Low, careless, too familiar. "Come in, babe. She's out for the night." Her pulse pounded as she pressed herself against the wall, out of sight. The camera's red light blinked silently above them, recording every step they took. Samantha's heels clicked on the floor tiles. "You sure she won't walk in?" Richard chuckled. "Emma, she wouldn't dare." Emma's hand tightened on her phone. For the first time in years, fear didn't control her. It fueled her. Up above, the camera's red light blinked again, steady and watching. The sound of laughter filled the living room like poison. Richard's voice came first, low, arrogant, dripping with pride. "You should have seen her face, Sam. She still thinks I'm working late." Samantha's laugh followed, sharp and careless. "You're terrible," she teased, wrapping her arms around him. "What if she finds out?" He chuckled, settling back on the couch. "Emma, she's too busy playing the perfect wife, too scared to breathe without my permission." The hidden camera in the kitchen blinked red, capturing every word, every movement. Samantha tilted her head, smirking. "You really plan to leave her?" "Of course," Richard said, pouring himself a drink. "Soon as I move my accounts and finalize the consulting payments, then she can keep the house." And her silence. Samantha snorted. "She'll survive. Women like her always do. They cry, they bake, and they wait for someone to tell them what to do next." Richard laughed harder, clinking his glass with hers. "Exactly. She's weak. Always has been." The laughter lingered, but the house itself seemed to grow cold, watching them in silence. The camera didn't blink. It simply remembered. Hours later, in Tara's apartment, Emma sat hunched over a laptop on the kitchen table. The glow from the screen illuminated her pale face. Tara sat beside her, arms crossed, her jaw tight. On the screen, Richard's smirk filled the frame. His voice, once familiar, now sounded like a stranger's. Every word sliced through her like glass. Emma didn't cry loudly. Her tears came silently, one after another, until her hands trembled too much to hold the cup in front of her. Nathan sat across from them, calm and composed, though his eyes flickered with quiet anger. "That's everything we need," he said firmly. "Infidelity, verbal abuse, financial fraud. It's all there." Emma wiped her face, forcing her voice to steady. "He said I'm weak." Tara reached for her hand. "He doesn't know what strength looks like, Em." Emma's gaze stayed fixed on the screen. Richard and Samantha's laughter replayed, haunting but also awakening something fierce within her. She whispered, "When I was 8, my father left. My mother begged him to stay. He looked at me and said, 'Weak people don't leave, they endure.'" The room went still. Tara's eyes softened. Nathan leaned forward, listening. Emma continued, her voice quiet but certain. "I believed that for years. That strength meant enduring. That silence meant peace. But my mother died waiting for someone to protect her. I'm not going to die waiting." Her words landed heavy, unshakable. She closed the laptop slowly, the faint echo of Richard's laughter still in the background. Nathan nodded once, impressed. "Then let's make sure he never controls you again." He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a stack of neatly prepared documents, divorce papers, financial freeze orders, and evidence summaries. He placed them on the table. "Tomorrow we serve him before he serves you." Emma stared at the papers for a long time. Her reflection shimmered faintly in the glass of the table, eyes red but steady, posture no longer timid. She reached for a pen. Her fingers no longer trembled. She signed. Tara smiled faintly, tears in her eyes. "Your aunt would be proud." Emma nodded, whispering almost to herself, "For the first time, I think I'm proud too." Nathan gathered the papers, sliding them into his folder. "This is airtight. He'll never see it coming. I'll have the process server deliver it first thing in the morning." Outside, thunder rolled faintly in the distance. Rain began to patter against the window, soft but persistent, like the world itself was washing away what once was. Emma stood, looking out at the dark street. Her voice was calm, almost serene. "He took everything from me, my trust, my freedom, my peace, but he forgot something." Nathan looked up. "What's that?" Emma turned, her expression unreadable. "I remember everything." The laptop screen behind her dimmed to black, except for one blinking notification from the camera feed. Recording. Active. In the video thumbnail, the front door opened again. Richard stepped inside, wet from rain. And he wasn't alone. Samantha followed, carrying a small suitcase. Emma's heart slowed, then steadied. Nathan glanced at her. "Emma." She smiled faintly, but her eyes stayed locked on the screen. "Let it record." The next morning, the house was quiet. Richard sat at the kitchen table, in his full suit, sipping coffee and scrolling through his phone. Emma was nowhere to be seen. He smirked, assuming she was sulking in the bedroom, just as she always did after he put her in her place. A sharp knock echoed through the foyer. Richard sighed, irritated by the interruption. "Emma," he yelled, "get the door." When no one answered, he huffed and went to the door himself. A man in a plain suit stood on the porch. "Richard Brooks?" the man asked, holding a thick envelope. "Yes," Richard said impatiently. "You've been served." The man handed him the envelope and left. Richard closed the door, a look of amusement on his face. He walked back to the kitchen, tossing the envelope on the counter. "Served? With what?" "She can't afford a lawyer." He opened it, expecting a handwritten plea. Instead, he saw the official letterhead of Carter and Associates Legal. His smirk faded. He pulled out the first document. Petition for dissolution of marriage. "She's divorcing me?" He laughed out loud. "On what grounds?" He flipped the page. His blood ran cold. "On grounds of adultery, gross financial misconduct, fraud, and domestic abuse." "What?" he whispered. He frantically flipped through the next pages. They were labeled Exhibit A, Exhibit B, Exhibit C. Exhibit A was a series of high-resolution stills from the hidden camera, of him and Samantha on his couch, of him saying, "She's weak, always has been." Exhibit B was a full printout of his bank transfers. The $25,000 payments to Samantha James. Next to it were copies of Emma's bank statements showing the exact same amounts being withdrawn from her emergency savings just days before. Exhibit C was a medical report, time-stamped from the previous night, detailing a facial contusion consistent with a slap. Richard's hands began to shake violently. The papers slipped from his grasp. No, no. How did she? His phone buzzed on the counter. He stared at it, terrified. It buzzed again. It wasn't Samantha. It was his office. He picked it up. "Richard," his partner's voice was ice cold. "What the hell is going on? We just got a notification from the bank that all your corporate accounts are frozen by court order, pending a fraud investigation. And why is the press calling me about you and a $150 million inheritance?" Richard couldn't breathe. He dropped the phone. Frozen accounts, inheritance, evidence. It wasn't just a divorce. It was an execution. He grabbed his keys, his face pale with panic and fury. He had to get to the office. He had to fix this. He ripped open the front door and ran to his car, leaving the evidence scattered across the kitchen floor like the broken plate from the night before. The boardroom door slammed so hard the walls shook. "Who leaked this?" Richard roared, his voice slicing through the air like thunder. He stared at the tablet in his partner's hand. His senior partners sat frozen, exchanging uneasy glances. The silence that followed was heavy, too heavy for the room of men who once feared and admired him. At the far end of the table, Mr. Harlan, the firm's finance director, cleared his throat. "It wasn't a leak, Richard. It was part of the court filing. It's public record now." "What are you talking about?" Richard snapped, his eyes wild. Harlan slid his tablet across the table. On the screen, a headline glowed in bold letters. "CEO's wife inherits $150 million fortune. Files evidence-backed. Lawsuit alleging abuse, fraud, and infidelity." Below the headline, a photo of Emma stared back. Composed, calm, her eyes steady as she walked out of a courthouse surrounded by flashing cameras. Richard's jaw went slack. "No," he breathed. "She wouldn't dare." "She did," Harlan interrupted, "and the media's all over it. Investors are pulling out. Your accounts are frozen, just as the bank said. The auditors found the discrepancies in your consulting payments, particularly to one Samantha James." At the sound of her name, Richard's face drained of color. He grabbed his phone, his hands trembling. Message after message flooded the screen. "Bank alert. Account access restricted. Client, meeting canceled pending legal review. Samantha, don't call me. I can't be dragged into this." He slammed the phone down, his voice breaking into fury. "She set me up. That..." He stopped mid-sentence, realizing the room was still full. The very board members who once laughed at his jokes now sat in stony silence. Harlan looked at him, expression unreadable. "Richard, the company's reputation is at stake. The board has voted to suspend you effective immediately." Richard's mouth opened, but no sound came out. His power, his pride, was slipping faster than he could grasp. "No, you can't. We already did," Harlan said firmly. "Security will escort you out." Richard's eyes darted around the table, desperate for support, but no one met his gaze. He stumbled out of the boardroom, past the cameras waiting in the hallway. Shutters clicked, reporters shouted questions. "Mr. Brooks, did your wife file charges? Is it true she inherited $150 million? Were you paying your mistress company funds?" He shoved through them, face red with fury and humiliation. His car waited outside, surrounded by noise and flashes. He yanked the door open, slamming it shut as if he could trap silence inside. But silence didn't come. His phone buzzed again, a single message from an unknown number. "Nathan Carter, you've been served." He hurled the phone onto the passenger seat and pressed the gas. Tires screeched as he sped toward the courthouse. Anger blinding reason. Emma stood outside the courthouse steps, a crowd of journalists and onlookers around her. She looked almost serene, dressed simply, her hair tied back neatly. Nathan stood beside her, calm and steady, handling the press. The moment Richard's car screeched to a stop, the crowd parted. Cameras turned, voices rose, chaos swelled. He stormed toward her, fury in every step. "You ruined me!" he shouted, his voice cracking under the weight of his own downfall. "Everything I built, you destroyed it!" Emma didn't flinch. Her eyes met his, calm and unshaken. "You did that when you forgot respect." The words hit harder than any slap could. Richard's face twisted, torn between rage and disbelief. He looked at her, really looked, and for the first time saw not the quiet wife he used to control, but a woman standing in the full light of her own strength. "You think you've won?" he spat. Emma's voice was soft, almost compassionate. "No, Richard, I just stopped losing." He took a step toward her, but Nathan moved between them. "That's enough," he said coldly. Police officers appeared from behind the courthouse pillars. One of them called his name. "Richard Brooks?" Richard turned, confused. "What now?" The officer held up a warrant. "You're under arrest for tax fraud and corporate misappropriation. Evidence was submitted this morning." Richard's confusion broke into raw panic. "What evidence?" Nathan's gaze was steady. "The kind you left in her files." As the officers cuffed him, Richard's eyes darted toward Emma one last time. "You did this to me," he hissed. She looked at him, her voice barely above a whisper. "No, you did this to yourself." The crowd erupted, shutters flashing, voices shouting questions. But Emma barely heard any of it. She watched as the man who once held power over every corner of her life was led away in handcuffs, shouting in vain. Nathan touched her shoulder lightly. "It's over." Emma exhaled, long and quiet. "No," she said, "it's beginning." The camera panned over her face, calm, luminous in the chaos. Behind her, Richard was shoved into the police car, shouting her name as the door slammed. One of the reporters yelled, "Mrs. Brooks, what will you do now?" Emma turned slightly, her expression unreadable. "Live," she said simply. Then from behind the crowd, a figure watched silently. Samantha, her eyes wide, her phone in hand. She wasn't smiling anymore. The flash of cameras filled the ballroom like lightning. Applause rippled through the crowd as Emma stepped onto the stage, her long silver gown catching the light. For a moment the sound was deafening. Cheers, voices, the rhythm of people rising to their feet. Then she reached the microphone, and everything went still. "Good evening," she began, her voice calm but strong. "When I was younger, I thought strength meant silence. I believed that if you endured enough pain quietly, you could turn it into peace. I was wrong." The room hung on her every word. "Tonight we open the Margaret Foundation, named after my late aunt, who taught me that kindness is the only inheritance that multiplies. This foundation will help women who are trapped, silenced, or forgotten find their way back to freedom." The audience erupted again, clapping, some even tearing up. At the front table, Tara grinned proudly, eyes shimmering. Nathan stood beside her, clapping softly, his face calm but full of respect. On the screens behind Emma, images flashed. Women rebuilding their lives, shelters being opened, smiling faces of those who had already been helped by her early projects. Emma's voice continued, steady and emotional. "I once lost everything I thought defined me," she said, looking out over the crowd. "But it turns out I was never lost. I was only waiting to begin." The applause was thunderous. The moment was hers. Across town in a dim, cluttered apartment, Richard sat hunched on a small couch, his face half lit by the glow of the TV. His expensive suits were gone. The walls were bare. The only sound was the quiet hum of the old refrigerator and Emma's voice coming through the speakers. He stared at the screen, frozen, watching her speak at the gala. Confident, graceful, untouchable. "Kindness," she was saying, "is not weakness. Forgiveness isn't surrender, it's strength." Richard's hand tightened around the empty glass in his palm. His eyes glistened, not with anger this time, but regret. On the table beside him lay a pile of unopened letters stamped final notice. His accounts had been seized, his company sold off. Samantha had left him months ago, taking what little she could. She'd even sent him a message once. "You deserve this." He lowered his head, whispering under his breath, "Emma, please." It wasn't loud, just a broken whisper to the woman who would never hear him again. Later that night, Emma stood by the balcony of the gala hall, looking over the city skyline. The wind brushed against her hair, carrying faint sounds of music and laughter from below. Tara joined her, holding 2 glasses of champagne. "You did it," Tara said softly. "You actually did it." Emma smiled. "No, we did." Nathan appeared a moment later, his tone warm but steady. "The board from the Women's Council just called. They want to feature your story nationwide." Emma laughed quietly, her voice full of calm. "Funny. He once told me no one would ever remember my name." Tara nudged her gently. "They will now." For a moment, the 3 of them stood together, watching the city lights. Emma turned back toward the hall where guests mingled, laughter echoing. Her world had changed completely, but it finally felt right. She glanced at the TV in the corner, where a news segment replayed clips of her speech. Beneath her photo, the headline scrolled, "Emma Brooks, from silence to strength." Her reflection met her gaze in the window, peaceful, composed, and free. Later that evening, as she walked alone toward her car, Emma passed a small jewelry store, still lit for the night. In the window sat a familiar necklace, a delicate silver pendant Richard once refused to buy her, saying, "It's too expensive for something you'll never wear." She stepped inside. The clerk smiled. "A gift?" Emma returned the smile softly. "No," she said, reaching for the necklace. "A reminder." She fastened it around her neck, looking at her reflection in the mirror. For the first time in years, she saw herself, whole, powerful, alive. As she walked back into the cool night, her voice played in her head like the final line of her own story. "He divorced me, thinking I'd be nothing without him. Turns out I was everything without him." The camera followed her out into the city lights, confident, unstoppable. And then, as the screen began to fade, her voice returned one last time, calm and certain. "The slap wasn't my ending. It was his beginning of regret."